Welcome to Take It from the Iron Woman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Iron Woman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Iron Woman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Iron Woman. We only have special guests, and I think today we're in for a real nice treat with Karen. Karen, introduce yourself, and first of all, welcome. Who is Karen who's going to join us today?
Thank you so much. I am Karen Morgan. I am joining you from Maine, where it's very wintry outside, but the sun is shining, and I'm very positive about what might be happening weather-wise very soon.
Let's hope. Karen and I, we met through the podcasting family, I would say. And you have 2 podcasts. So tell us a little bit. And I was certainly intrigued about the Purple Bike, talking about sports. So let's talk. Well, how did that come about?
The Purple Bike came about. Obviously, COVID affected a lot of us in terms of what we do for work. And since I was home, my full-time job is as a comedian. I actually perform and go to do shows. But since last March, there's been no live comedy shows. I was at home, and one of my touring partners said, this would be a great time. We might as well start a podcast. He and I started with our podcast before I took the podcast workshop. We didn't know what we were doing with that one. We still, that one is sort of a free flow. He is a male comedian who is a dad and a husband, and I do the wife and mother stuff. That podcast is called Lawn and Disorder.
Sounds so funny.
And we just talk about kind of what we talk about on the comedy stage with that show. We talk about being a parent. We talk about being a spouse. We talk about just kind of life things. But that show is really, it's not very organized in terms, it's just a conversation. We sort of start talking and we'll say, today we're going to talk about kids sports and that sort of thing. That's a fun podcast, but less involved. And mostly because we didn't know what we were doing when we started. We just bought a microphone and plugged it in and started. Yeah, it was fun.
So it's more like an improvisation. You have one word and then you see where you go.
Yeah, or one subject. Today we're going to talk about Christmas, or today we're going to talk about Thanksgiving. And we just have a conversation back and forth. We do try to leave in each show at the end with advice for our listeners. So whether it's about parenting or recycling, or it's kind of a very free form podcast, which is very different from the Purple Bike. And I started that one when I started out taking the Akimbo podcast workshop last summer. And I started out with 2 or 3 different podcasts in my head of what I wanted to do. And about halfway through the whole workshop, I was like, I didn't like any of them. And I wanted to do something that was sort of more about myself. I didn't necessarily want it to be a comedy one. So the Purple Bike is, I'll tell you the story about why it's called the Purple Bike.
Sounds fun.
When I was in 5th grade, I got my first Purple Bike. And that was 1975. It had a sparkly banana seat. It had big handlebars. It was a fun bike. And then the next Purple Bike I got in 2015 after I started doing triathlons and riding my bike more. And that was a nice road bike, a nice trek road bike. So I call my podcast The Purple Bike because I talk about the years from 1975 to 2015. That's 40 years. And I take each year, and in each year I talk about what music we were listening to, what TV shows we were listening to, what movies were out. It's kind of a pop culture discussion of things that we were doing. I try to include clips of music and clips from movies so people can kind of remember. And it's been really fun to create it. It's definitely, people expect it because I do comedy. They're like, they think it's going to be funny, and it's not necessarily funny. But it's interesting in terms of taking each year and talking about what happened in those years. So that's why it's called the Purple Bike.
This is so funny. I remember I learned to bike without the helmet. I think I had an orange bike now that I remember.
Yeah, none of us had helmets on. I think that one of the biggest things we had back then was we had bell-bottom jeans. And we would ride our bike with our jeans, and they would always get caught in the chain. Yeah. At one point, I think I had rubber bands that I would put around my pants to be able to bike in my big, wide bell-bottom jeans.
These were the days. Oh, my God. They will never come back.
I don't think so. But what's been nice, particularly during COVID, is I research for the Purple Bike, and I go back and I say, okay, what movies were playing in 1977? I'm kind of reliving those years. It's very nostalgic. And I'm like, oh, I forgot that song. I spend a lot of time listening to the music because I'm like, oh, I forgot this song is great. And I'll just sit in here playing the music. And I can't play the whole song on the podcast because it would just be one big music podcast. Yeah. It's really fun to go back and remember where you were in these particular years. Where were you when, I'm on 2000, the year 2000. And so I'm reliving Y2K and how we were all worried that the computers were all going to crash and the power grids are going to go down. And I just remember on a day-to-day basis right now with COVID, we don't think about those things. The podcast has given me a great excuse to relive some fun times from the past.
And it's like a history, like milestones. I mean, if you ask me 2000, I remember we did a midnight run in New York City, and it was just, we were running into the new year. And one of my friends, he had to work because he was an IT guy. So we were like, I hope nothing will be happening.
Yeah, he was going to be one of those guys that if everything went down, he was going to have to fix it.
Exactly. And then he said, nothing happened. I don't know what was the big thing. But everybody says, make sure you have enough money at home. We never know if we can take out money. I remember that.
I think we even bought extra groceries. And then when it happened, and then nothing happened. And everybody was like, oh, we got all upset for no reason. It's kind of fun to go back. But I don't think our brains are really wired to live in the past. Sometimes being reminded of, what were you in Y2K? Or what were you doing when this particular movie, like going back and hearing the year that Star Wars came out or the year that Indiana Jones came out. Is certain things you remember. One of the first movies I talked about was Jaws. And I remember I was in 5th grade when Jaws came out, and my mom just dropped me and my friend at the theater. We were like, oh, it's a movie about the beach. We had no idea how scary it was going to be. So anyway, back then your parents just dropped you off at the movie theater. It was a different time.
Or talking about bikes, I remember we were 2, 3, or 4 girls from the neighborhood, and I was the leader. Everybody had a bike, and we would kind of let's go and go on the big road. No helmet, obviously. And then I told my mom, we went to the big intersection. She's like, what did you do? You took those girls with you? And I'm like, what's the big deal? We're like, yeah.
A different time, a different era. I don't think that, as a parent now, I would be probably horrified at what if my kids did what we did. Yeah, because we were just gone all day. To me, bikes, and they still sort of represent, whether we're riding our bike for a triathlon or just riding it for pleasure, it's an escape. And I think back then when we were younger, before we could drive cars, that's how we went. That's how we got places. And we had neighborhoods as you had your friends. I had a group of friends in our neighborhood, and we just got together on our bikes and hung out. Yeah.
We were always outside. I mean, that was the thing. No computer, no nothing, right? No TV. Tell me about your triathlon. You have a bike, and you said before we recorded, you went swimming? You went to the pool?
Oh, I am actually an open water swimmer. But in Maine, it's really cold right now. The ocean temperature is not. I have friends that will swim now, but I will not. Even in the summer, the ocean temperature here get much higher than 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It's pretty chilly, and I wear a wetsuit. You and I were just talking about Poland Springs. Our lake house is near in Poland, Maine, and I do swim in the lake there. So the lake there is lovely. It's perfect temperature. You don't need a wetsuit there, although sometimes that's still. My husband is big about breaking the ice on January 1st to do that polar dip, and I'm like, no. Not for me. So I'm in the pool right now. Our local high school pool is open, thankfully, because I know some of my friends in the UK, all their pools are still closed. I feel fortunate that at least I'm able. So I swim with the masters group three mornings a week here. And but I'm not riding my bike outside right now because it is a lot of ice and snow, and I usually get on my bike sometime around March.
I remember when I trained for my Ironman in Lake Placid, we went there Memorial Day weekend, and it was even too cold to swim, or at least for me, and the snow was gone. I think there was still some snow there. So Lake Placid is equally cold in Maine.
It's very chilly. We usually do our first lake swim Memorial Day weekend. That's usually, the ice is gone. Ice usually goes out of the lakes first week of April. The ice goes out, but it's still really cold. So Memorial Day, we'll take a group and we try to do our Memorial Day swim. But I know Lake Placid, which my two older kids are in college at St. Lawrence University, and we kind of go up and over Lake Placid to get there from here. And I know that it's very cold up there too. But I've heard that is a beautiful, beautiful place to have a triathlon. I've not been to the tri.
It's very beautiful, but thankfully I only read after I did the Ironman that the bike course is one of the hardest. I think it's one of the top 10 hardest. I'm glad I read that after the fact. There is like a 6-mile downhill, and then on the other side, there are tons of hills. If you ever want to do it, be on the bike, go onto the hills.
Hills make us stronger. I'm always yelling that. I am more of a sprint tri person. My first triathlon was 2010. And in Maine, it's called Try for the Cure, and it's all women. What's really nice, I found that with it, all women, everybody is really supportive of each other. And you're in the swim, and you know how sometimes you go in the swim and you'll knock your goggles off. People will bump into you, and they don't mean to. But with a group of women, everybody was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." It was just really cute. And then I've done tries with men, and they're not apologizing. The women will apologize to each other, but the men don't.
I had, in one of my prior podcasts, I had the founder of Team Lipstick. And this is a female-only triathlon team. And they're based in New York, Washington, Austin, Texas, and in New Jersey. She had some fun stories, and it's only women. And it's how the support is amazing. And I'm laughing at that story when people swim into you and say sorry. I can certainly understand that. I would do the same.
Exactly. I do find that the triathlon community, like I said, I've never done an Ironman. I signed up for one as an aqua biker, but ultimately I had to take my child to college and couldn't go. But I find that the community is so supportive, and that female triathletes, we have other challenges in terms of balancing family and balancing jobs and everything else that everybody does. And I think it is such a commitment. When you meet someone who does it, you appreciate the commitment level to what they do. As a really good sprint tri person, I'm happy swimming long distance. I can swim. I like to swim 5Ks. I will swim 10Ks. I'm happy swimming forever, but I'm not a very good runner. I've always that's the part where I don't do really well on distance, but I appreciate people that do it, and people like you that train. And it's an amazing commitment, and it's just a pretty cool community though.
And I come the opposite from you. I come from the running. So I also started in 2010, and then I didn't know the freestyle. So I took some classes, and it was a swim instructor. And I said to him, "Do you think there is hope for me to learn it?" And he says, "Yeah, you're an athlete. You've done marathons within no time." What's actually interesting, because I've never done it before, the crawl stroke, it was easier for me to learn than to when you know it a little bit and you do it wrong or not good, to correct it. I thought that was pretty amazing to see that. I was like, I need to do this. I need to be able to breathe on both sides. And so it was amazing.
That's interesting that you say that, because one of the girls that I swim with here in Maine didn't learn to swim until later in life, and she is being coached by another friend of mine. She learned to bilateral breathe very easily because she was learning, and as an adult, you process it differently, and as an adult athlete, you also process it differently. But I had been swimming competitively my whole life, before I started being an open water swimmer, I only breathed out one side. And because that was ingrained in me since a younger swimmer. As an open water swimmer, particularly in the ocean here, I had to learn to bilateral breathe because of the waves and because you just don't know what you're going to get into. So learning it as an adult was a little bit different. So she picked it up right away, and I was still struggling with it.
Always great to talk to a fellow triathlete. She's the best swimmer. I'm not, but we can all learn from each other. Take it from the Iron Woman. We have episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Listen to the podcast. There's something for everybody. Only exciting women who are changing the world, who are daring to step up and lead. And Take It From the Iron Woman initially started as a book. It's global business coaching with sports parallels. You can find my story, moving from Switzerland to the US, going to Kilimanjaro, and finally the Ironman. It will continue.